When I started making videos, doing this podcast, I knew that there were three things I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to talk about goblins, I wanted to talk about action figures, and I wanted to make the video that I'm making now. I'm not sure if this channel will keep going or not. There's a lot of things that keep me from doing this, and I enjoy doing it, but I know that I need to make this video because this has been my crusade for a long time. So today we're going to talk about Marauder Mo, the action figure that should exist. It needs to exist. And I hope with this video, whoever else needs to, will understand why we need Marauder Mo. So first, just to say the context of what we're talking about. We're talking about the world of Star Trek, and we're talking about action figures. The point of this video is not to go into everything about Star Trek action figures. If you need to learn about that, watch The Toys That Made Us on Star Trek. It is insane. Everything that one of the largest IPs, largest properties has been through. And then you'll see too why it's such an anomaly, why we don't have this key figure in Marauder Mo, because in the Star Trek universe, in canon, in the story and world and universe that is Star Trek, there exists a canon action figure. Yet there has never been an action figure made of said action figure. For a franchise that's going on how many decades, that has so many action figures made of it, for whatever reason, they've never actually made the action figure of the action figure, the one that should exist. So this has been my crusade for about 20 years. And I'm hoping with this video, finally, I can appeal to the masses, to whoever else, to understand why this should happen, why it needs to. And then my ideas on how to make it something really special, tying into what we see in the show. So this is, again, one of my deep dives, one of my looks at something that makes sense. Like, I don't ever consider myself creative. I just see what's there. And what I see that's there is an action figure that should exist. So come with me, and we're going to go into the world and history of Marauder Mo. As I said, I can't go into Star Trek action figures. That's a whole different world. That has been a property that since Mego, back in the 70s, doing action figures for Star Trek. They had an enormous run during the 90s, from 1992 to 2000, 8 years, with something, different sources say something between like 284, 350 different action figures came out during this Playmates line. I was on the Art Asylum boards when I was in my Mini-Mate phase, and there were the Star Trek license there, and I proposed Marauder Mo then, because that's when I understood that for some reason we don't have this action figure. Since kind of the demise of the Playmates era and the Art Asylum Diamond Select era, a lot of other companies have picked up trying to do Star Trek figures, but they're really limited. They just do a couple and then they fizzle out. Now there's a couple that are going on, and like I said, it's too much for me to go into. Watch The Toys That Made Us, Star Trek. It will blow your mind, and it'll also make you question things about action figures as an industry, because here you have this wonderful property, something that I love in Star Trek, but the figure that exists in Star Trek doesn't exist in our world, and that I can't wrap my head around it. So there are companies now, and as I'm making this, Nacelle Toys, who made the show, produced The Toys That Made Us, are now running the ship on Star Trek figures, and we'll talk about that later, but I'm hoping now is the right time that people are aware enough and get what Star Trek is about enough that we will get Marauder Mo. But the first point we need to make is we have, again, as long as the show's been around, one of the most popular IPs, Star Trek, there's been so many different action figures made, but the one figure that we're missing is the one that exists in the Star Trek universe. I mean, there's other characters, other things, but when I start telling you about Marauder Mo, which is something people don't know about, you're going to go, what's going on here? And hopefully you'll tell the people to make Marauder Mo, because we need Marauder Mo. And I think I know the challenges why they won't, but when there's just such a cool opportunity here. So again, the history of Star Trek figures, that's a whole different topic, and that's not for me. I'm focusing on, again, my goblins and my action figures, and that's why we're talking about Marauder Mo. So one of the reasons why I feel like Marauder Mo is a challenge for action figure companies to wrap their head around is because it comes from part of the more satirical side of Star Trek. There's something that's looking at us, and especially action figures, kind of critically. And it's because the origin of Marauder Mo, first of all, it comes from a novel, in part. The novel Legends of the Ferengi. The Ferengi are my favorite race. I have a little bust here of the Grand Nagus here on my desk all the time. Effectively, they're space goblins, so now you can see why it especially is in my wheelhouse. So the Ferengi are capitalists. It's about greed. It's about money. And in the novel Legends of the Ferengi, it's kind of fun because it goes to a lot of the rules of acquisition for the Ferengi, which are the rules that govern their society, and especially they're kind of like proverbial sayings. You might take something from the Bible and how it's supposed to be a basis for morality. This is the basis for their commerce. So very goblin. But it's also very critical of the era in which I grew up in the 80s. To me, that's part of what I enjoy about the Ferengi, is that it's a way of looking at humans, at ourselves, during this period of greed, during this period of commerce. And in the book, it has a lot of fun stories. It's a great read. It's fun. But it kind of gives backstory to a lot of those rules of acquisition. And some of those tie into this idea of a character in the Star Trek universe of Marauder Mo, a Ferengi who kind of exists in some kind of media, and that there's little lessons that go with it. And especially a lot of the stories in Legends of the Ferengi touch on selling merchandise, whether it's kind of the little band that they would wear across the back of their head to kind of cover this part of their head up, or to sell action figures or other merchandise. This then bleeds over into the show because we have Ira Steven Behr, who was writing both the book, Legends of the Ferengi, and then also on the TV show. In the Deep Space Nine episode, Ferengi Love Songs, Quark goes back to Ferenginar. And when he's on Ferenginar, his mother, Moogie, blessed be, she brings out a box of his Marauder Mo action figures. I remember watching this when I was younger, when I was in my teens, and I was into Deep Space Nine, and I loved the Ferengi. And I said, wait a minute. There's action figures in the show? Where are they? I need these. So between the novel and that episode of the TV show, we have our introduction in name to Marauder Mo. Moogie kind of chastises Quark for doing the same thing that I heard growing up, is not keeping his figures in the box so that they would be worth more. So on point for kind of talking about action figure collecting, especially, remember, this is in 1997. So the Playmates line was the big deal. There was a lot of controversy at times talking about the Playmates toys and their value. It was one of the first lines that really got people collecting them for their value. The toys during the 80s, He-Man, Transformers, Ninja Turtles, those ones, the idea that they were worth things kind of came out later. Even G.I. Joes and all of those things. And baseball cards. Like, my history of collecting, I can go through and go like, okay, this mentality that episode, that moment hit on about saying like, keep it in package. It's going to be worth more later. That was the culture. Like, I was born in 80, so that culture was right there for me. So when Moogie got after Quark about, keeping his toy pristine, keeping it in the package, its value, that's kind of a really pointed criticism of the action figure world. Quark was happy just to have his toys. I mean, there's a moment there, you just see it, kind of me as a collector, I even get nostalgic watching it because he's like connecting with his childhood toys, which when I talk to other collectors, how many times does that idea come up of we're reconnecting with our childhood through our toys? It's a fun idea. And here you see kind of the dark side of it coming out in one moment, again, in a TV show in that world. So Marauder Mo, it hits on these ideas that resonate with modern toy collectors. So again, I just have this in my head. Where's my Marauder Mo action figure? Now on the show, the prop master for Deep Space Nine actually made custom action figures to be used as the prop. So when Quark pulls out these action figures, or excuse me, when Moogie presents the action figures to Quark, they're actually custom action figures that were made as props. So they were never made in any other capacity. There were 3 of these figures, and they were customized from McFarlane Toys Super Patriot figures, which came out in 1996. So the year before, so the prop master saw these, for whatever reason, picked them out, made some customs, made some sculpey heads so that they fit kind of the Ferengi profile, capturing those features. That's how those exist. They were sold at auction, so we actually have really nice pictures of them that you're looking at over here. But that's the idea, is that there were props made in the show so that they weren't just referencing Marauder Mo figures, but they were actually showing them. So there were some made as props. And I think that's just kind of a cool concept, maybe one of the cool ideas that I'll touch on and what a Marauder Mo figure could look like. But the idea is that, yes, we had, for a moment, we have a canonical story. Like, these weren't just props in the sense of they're just going to be set decoration. These were props to help tell this idea, to make kind of a point, make kind of a telltale part of this story of Quark growing up in that capitalist society, the same as me, the person who was watching it, and you watching it, can see that the idea of action figures, their value, all that kind of stuff tied together, that mentality that was huge in the 80s and 90s, that they were right there. So you have an idea, you have a story behind it, and you have this prop. Everything all coming together. Again, this is just so cool. And you look at the figures, they're pretty cool looking. Let's talk about that just for a little second. So thank you to Memory Alpha, the Wikipedia for Star Trek fandom. It does mention even that the John Eves had the concept and the idea for these figures to actually be made, again, following the script, just kind of playing with different ideas. They have 3 names, and you'll note something interesting about them. There's Slug the Looser, Lord Latinum, and Brack the Big Spender. So those are kind of the names that he made for these figures that would be used as props. They're really cool. It's interesting, even the comment on the Memory Alpha is that the production staff wanted their own of these. There's no proof that they were ever made, though. Another detail is none of these are named Marauder Mo. So you have this idea for 3 figures, very Ferengi, very pretty cool looking, pretty decent design, but at no point are they actually the Marauder Mo figure. So they're extra figures in the line, kind of side characters. That's where, when I start putting these pieces together, and maybe you're starting to get this too, we have a Marauder Mo named in canon. This is the character. And then we don't just have Marauder Mo. Like if you read the Legends of the Ferengi book, it talks about several other characters. He has Nit the Sidekick, Dilb the Destitute. There's Marauder Mo, Hero of Ferenginar. But of course, then there's a repaint and a different thing going on in the book that talks about Relief Worker Mo. We're not talking about just one figure anymore. We're talking about kind of the idea of a whole figure line. And that's where, again, I mean, if you've seen any of my videos here, you know, like, I just like to run with these ideas. It's right there. People have already done the work. Let's explore. Let's develop this further and see where it goes. Because, again, this is, people have put thought, put effort into these ideas. And then now we're sitting at this point. Okay, we have, you know, Lorg and Brick and Slug, Marauder Mo. I mean, at the very least, we're talking, there should be 4 figures that exist in Star Trek that, why don't we have them in our hands? How many Star Trek collectors, maybe they don't go this deep on things. Maybe they didn't pick up on this line. Maybe they didn't pick up on this detail in this episode. I know I mentioned this idea to my wife. She's seen kind of the artwork I've done over the years, something that we'll talk about and look at here in a moment. But as an action figure collector, as a fan of Star Trek, you just have to, it boggles my mind. Like, has this idea ever been explored? I've never seen anyone from Playmates, Art Asylum, Diamond Select say, wait a minute, there are action figures in Star Trek. We need to make those. That's what we're going to talk about now. And as I put on my Ferengi head and I think about this, both as the real world collector and in universe, I just have to keep thinking to myself, where is Marauder Mo? It is, there's a little bit of parody in there. There's a little bit of this idea from the episode saying, keep it in package. It's a collectible. These are the terms that I grew up with. These are the terms that still exist today in the action figure collecting world. When any of these companies are making action figures, they're not doing it for the goodness of their hearts. They're not hitting these altruistic motives, one of the things that's supposed to be in Star Trek. They're hitting the greed. They're hitting, maybe not the greed, but they're hitting these ideas of, this is a collectible, a piece of merchandise. This is something that has a value. So where are we doing this in the real world? Where has this been? Is there a reason why this figure's never been developed? I don't know. I can't know. No one's ever told me. But I will say, as a fan, I want this. This hits so many notes with me. And I think it's such a great idea because it is, there's that little touch of parody that makes it, this doesn't need to be just the standard figure along with everything else in the line. This is something special. This is something apart. So on the one hand, you could make, and I've seen people kind of respond to my comment saying, well, we already have the Ferengi Marauder. That's sufficient. The people who say that are missing the point entirely, that we are talking about an in-canon, in-universe made, we have a physical representation in the props of figures in the Star Trek universe. How do we bring those into ours? And isn't this going to resonate with action figure collectors? Isn't this going to resonate with fans? Because in a way, depending on how it would be done, you could speak to that element of parody. You could speak to someone who wants a prop from the show. You could touch on so many different ideas. There's different ways to go with this that can all go back to the central idea of really celebrating and enjoying the hobby that accompanies the media. Collecting action figures, collectibles, all that stuff from your, collectible plate, all the way through everything else that goes along with the media. There's so many absurd ideas, especially with Star Trek, that have been made over the years. And then I just have to go. This is my crusade. How do we not have the one action figure that was in Star Trek in our own hands? Let's talk about some ideas. Like, this is also, again, this has been my idea for so long. I've got lots of artwork we're going to talk about now to just show some ideas, some concepts of how I think this could go in the world, because if we've already touched on it, it's not just Mo, it's a whole world we could explore with Marauder Mo to kind of have fun, enjoy the hobby, enjoy the collectible, enjoy the absurdity that we're seeing with just this one little piece of minutia in Star Trek that I think just is so cool and so much fun. So I want something to be faithful to the idea presented in the show. I want something that's going to touch on those elements of 80s action figure collecting. Whether it's just one figure, whether it's the 3 figures that we saw in the show, I want this to be an opportunity to do something really different and fun, and in a way, a love letter to action figure collectors. There's something to me that over the years, there's been controversy about Star Trek figures. This could be a really cool way to just say, all the action figure collectors of Star Trek action figures over the decades, this is like a love letter. This is something saying they're taking the figure from the show and we're putting it in your hands. That's such a cool idea, and it's worth exploring. So for me, the ideas that are presented in the book, in Legends of the Ferengi, and then also in different episodes, because Marauder Mo is mentioned just briefly in different episodes. Rom gets it where he had one of the accessories, the whip, stuck in his ear. There's lots of little ideas that are out there on how this could be fun. And to me, what really the concept I've run with is seeing the parallel between how Marauder Mo is presented on the show and the media and Masters of the Universe, He-Man. I'm going to show a fun picture here. So I like this idea of He-Man has, again, that's a whole different subject. I'm not going to go into that. But in brief, the idea that you had an action figure line that was so big and so commercial, and it brought out all these ideas, like that resonates with action figures today even. And so I want to see that developed and merged and pushed even further, pushed to an extreme even, to draw the parallels and make it just super clear one way to go with this. I do think, we're talking right now, Nacelle Toys now has the license for Star Trek, and I've pitched and I sent my email in kind of saying this is the artwork, these are the ideas I had, and so this is me vocalizing some of these things, and I got a receipt saying it's a cool idea, so I'm hopeful. Could you just make a Marauder Mo figure in the line and call it good? You sure could. That would be one way to do it. But my wild idea is to really run with it. Kind of drawing, and I know this has been done now with other media, that Masters of the Universe in their modern iteration has been crossing over with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They did things with like Thundercats, with DC Comics, horror, like that style has been done in different media. And I think it's been pretty cool. And I just want to see that really just put it in your face, the parallelism between what was in the show and what is in our world. With Mo, he's a marauder, so why not use some of the designs for the maligned Ferengi Marauder outfits? Why not pump them up? Why not make it fit in this Masters of the Universe kind of style and aesthetic? And then kind of the story that comes from that. Think about the He-Man cartoon. How many episodes were him? Yeah, he had some action and whatever. I'm not a huge Masters fan, and I didn't watch it a ton when I was growing up. But I knew enough. And every episode, whether it was Masters of the Universe or Thundercats or Silverhawks, they had like a lesson of the day. And the history behind that, why it had to have those lessons of the days, whether it was the G.I. Joe public service announcements kind of things, that was due to trying to get around the super commercialization that had to exist, that was with these toy lines, because they were so popular and fun. The cartoons, to make them not be seen as just 20-minute commercials for toys, they had to put these educational lessons or something else in there to make there seem to be some kind of educational value. I really like the idea of taking that element and playing it up, how it fits into this. Let's have the Marauder Mo. If in my head, the episodes, each episode, if there would be, would have that same idea. This is a Ferengi who's, instead of being, thin and, just like your typical Ferengi, instead he's this big bustle-bound guy, just to really make that parody element clear. But what if, in theory, each episode of this hypothetical show had their little lesson about the rules of acquisition? Kind of like the Legends of the Ferengi book. Everything could kind of tie back together in this world. So then when we talk about all the other characters that we can now get into, because we're not just talking about, okay, we just need to, take some different element or idea. The fact that the props on the show were all the same figure or base figure that was used to make the prop, that's that element of reusing parts, something that Masters of the Universe and every other line is done as a cost-saving measure so that the figures are more profitable. Something that's still done today out of necessity. So let's do that idea. Let's run with the parts reuse. Let's make those 3 figures that were from the show, the props, let's make them fit in too. So we have Lorg and Brick and Slug. Let's take them not just as props, but guess what? They could even be pretty similar in body style. Make them like Marauder Mo as well. So again, 1 figure, 4 figures. We're getting this idea of the world of Marauder Mo, if you're thinking about it as really like some fun, goofy parody of He-Man and Masters of the Universe, of any other cartoon from the 80s. you're getting the idea of like, hey, wait a minute, there's a lot of fun stuff that could be done with this. All the other costume designs for Ferengi, for really any race in Star Trek now is kind of fodder for this show. Something like some of the early designs, like I also like to draw the parallel between how the early Ferengi in Star Trek are much different than the ones we see on Deep Space Nine. The same could really be said for just about anything on Star Trek. The Cardassians, again, they had one look and one style and everything when they were first introduced. Like he is the main Cardassian has a little mustache and they have this armor. But when we see that on Deep Space Nine, they've gotten a redesign. So why not play with that? Have we ever had figures of those original design Cardassians? I don't think so, but we have had plenty of other Cardassians. So why not play with that original design or the newer design? Just play with it. Enjoy some of the different, I don't want to call them failings, but the different growth that Star Trek has had over the decades, and show that progress. You can even bring in lots of different elements. One thing I kind of did is, okay, if you're thinking of Marauder Mo as the hero of our story, telling us all about the virtues of greed and profit, you need an enemy. He-Man has his Skeletor, Lion-O has his Mumra. In the book Legends of the Ferengi, they refer to the smiling partner as kind of the boogeyman of Ferenginar. Why not play this up? Why not make it that the smiling partner is kind of this other side of Ferengi culture that they want to teach the little loblings, the little kids of Ferenginar, what's bad, how to avoid some bad deals, how to avoid things like altruism and charity. So they need the smiling partner, someone who's out to get them. So that's your bad guy. Okay, so now we're going all over the place, aren't we? Why not throw in some ideas that maybe Starfleet's bad? Sounds like a fun idea. And again, now we're way off from where we started, from the idea of making Star Trek figures. Now we're talking about, let's turn this whole thing on its head. Because if we have someone like this smiling partner as the bad guy, well, he needs some cronies. He needs his merman and beastman. Why not take, as you have in the book Legends of the Ferengi, the boogeymen from other cultures? There's an episode of Star Trek where they kind of play into that, about people's fears. Let's talk about people who are antithetical to Ferengis. So the Borg, they're a big collective. They don't care about money at all. They're the worst thing you could imagine. Well, one of the worst things. Maybe just other races. Why not just start throwing everything you can, whether it's the Breen, Klingons, Orion. Let's just throw it all in here. So that's where my idea goes way off. We're in uncharted territories here. And so I'm going to stop. But you get the idea, is that we have a jumping off point with Marauder Mo. You have really good justification as to why this figure needs to exist. If you made just the one Marauder Mo, I would be so happy. If you could take it a step further, or maybe if this is just the way you want to do it, is the figures that were on the show, or even just one of them, that too would be a huge win. My idea, my dream would be a whole Marauder Mo universe, something that should exist inside of Star Trek, something that we've touched on little points at how logically these things make sense. So let's go all out, because this is, to me, what always has been the sticking point. Is it that the Ferengi are too close to home? Is it that when we think about the commentary of Marauder Mo, that maybe it's a little too painful to admit? That's possible. But at the end of the day, as action figures, can't we just, action figure collectors, we need to remember this is about having fun. This is about connecting with different moments in our youth. This is about enjoying a hobby. That's to me the real point of like, do these companies, if they said, I don't think these will sell, in some way, that's possible. I don't feel like anyone has given it the fair thought. I'm not saying that I necessarily thought everything through in this video, but just to really think about what this figure would mean, what it represents. This is a deeper connection between the fans and the media. That's why, genuinely, I have always crusaded that we need Marauder Mo. It's not just the Ferengi thing to do, but for anyone out there who makes action figures, you have to have a passion for what you're doing. Yes, this is a deep cut. I am not going to pretend like this is, low-hanging fruit, this in one sense. But this is an idea that as you explore it, as you think about it, it just makes so much sense. It's so logical. And it's so fun. Again, I've gone way off here, but just thinking for a moment about what all of these things could mean, a different look, a different exploration of the media, going on a deeper level. I think it's just incredibly fun, and it's a place just to imagine what kind of silly world we as the action figure collectors would have in the actual world of Star Trek. I mean, when we watch Star Trek, we're imagining, well, what color uniform am I going to be? Because what division, what place would I be in Starfleet? Where would I be as an explorer in space? What would be my role if I didn't have some of the worries that we have today? That imagining is something fundamental to Star Trek. And then you have a whole subculture here of action figure collectors. People, too, who want to embrace their inner child. People who want to have fun. So that is my pitch for Marauder Mo. To just embrace this one idea, as silly, as deep as it is, and make it a reality. Because for the people at Nacelle at right now, anyone else in the future, whoever has that privilege to work with Star Trek media and merchandise, think about this element of really connecting something that exists in the show and making it in the hands of the fans. So this is my pitch. This is my appeal. If you need any ideas for episodes of Marauder Mo, give me a call. We will work it out, because I get it. It's so silly. This whole thing is silly. It's absurd. But it makes sense. So yes, give me my Marauder Mo. I will not stop. I will not desist. I even want a Plunderling Marauder Mo, just to bring it all back together. I want a Marauder Mo in Infinite Legions. Somebody has to get this Marauder Mo figure made. I'm appealing to anyone and everyone who will listen. Put the word out there. We need Marauder Mo.